Eugene locked the heavy metal door behind him, kicked off his shoes, and slung his bag over the shoulder as he entered the apartment. Without taking off his jacket, the plump, young man, whose face more closely resembled an old Disney cartoon chick, began to wander from one room to another, carefully examining the apartment. It really feels different to inspect the place on your own, when no one is going to point out the flaws of the apartment. Especially considering the suspiciously low rent for such an apartment. Yet, after half an hour of search, Eugene found nothing wrong. The apartment more than justified its cost, and that was quite important. Coming from a small town, the red-haired guy had worked as a simple locksmith at a tie shop. Eugene had never been known for his character, work ethic, or even ambition. After he signed up for a car repair course, he struggled to make it through the first year. The relentless style of his factory job, which mirrored his mother's, became a burden he truly despised. He had never been fond of working in general, considering it as the fate of ordinary laborers. He believed he could earn a living using his brain on the internet. After that hadn't been successful, not to mention his meager locksmith salary. He was entirely dependent on his parents' support, especially his mother's support, as of late. Dragging his bag into the bedroom, he lazily began to unpack it. A meager supply of food, toiletries, and an old laptop quickly found their place in an overly commodious apartment. After unpacking a bag, Eugene whirled and slumped into the armchair in the living room, and right at that moment, the doorbell rang. Who could possibly know he was here? Approaching the door, he looked through the peephole and sadly smiled. Standing on the doorstep was a cheerful gray-haired lady with the two large bags. Letting out a melancholic sigh, Eugene unlocked the door. The somewhat hoarse and cheerful lady shuffled inside with her package and quickly embraced her son. She began to speak rapidly.
Eugene, I've got potatoes, onion, carrots, and pickles. Oh yeah, and a few cans in this bag. There's canned meat in that one. Some bacon, chicken, beef liver. Just put everything in the fridge. Otherwise the meat will spoil. It's already partially sold. Alright, don't move around like that, liver. I will drop by in a couple of days.
She hugged her son once more and left the apartment. The young man closed the door and let out a melancholic sigh. He felt overwhelmed by his mother's excessive care. He was already 26 years old, and he believed he could take care of himself. Or at least, that's what he thought. In truth, Eugene was commonly known as someone overly attached to his father, as a papa's boy in everyday terms. And after his father's death, this burden some lazy flag has passed to his mother. Mia Clark could see and understand everything perfectly, but she loved her son too much to be strict with him or demand anything else. And she felt that her son needed her support more than ever. Or at least that's what she believed. Eugene, on the other hand, had easily weathered his father's death and always took his parents' support and help for granted. And in other words, he was a typical domestic parasite. The doorbell rang again. Perhaps his mother had forgotten something to pass on. But reluctantly approaching the door and starting to unlock it, Eugene mechanically looked through the peephole and stepped back from it, displeased. What on earth? There was no one on the doorstep, but there was a strange message written in a crooked handwriting with a black suit and a peachy wall across from the neighboring apartment.
Look through the peephole. Give away what is very precious to you.
Eugene read the strange message aloud, and after a brief pause, he opened the door and stepped into the hallway. Listened carefully, but hearing no footsteps. It seemed that the locals, upon noticing the new tenant, had decided to play a prank and give him a scare. Where could the pranksters have quickly disappeared to? Of course, into the apartment across the hallway. The young man approached the neighboring door with determination and rang the doorbell, but no one seemed to be in a hurry to answer. So he began to knock persistently on the door. His persistence eventually paid off, and after a few minutes, he heard the distinct sound of the lock being unlocked. A gray-haired man cautiously peered through the doorway. He gave Eugene a stern look and dryly asked,
What do you want?
Expecting to encounter some mischievous teenager, the young man was initially flustered, but quickly regained his composure and began to explain the strange message he found. The man's demeanor changed instantly, and he motioned for the new tenant to enter his apartment without saying a word. They went into the kitchen, and the neighbor, still in silence, took out a bottle of cheap alcohol and a jar of pickled tomatoes from the fridge. Filling 2 cut glass glasses, and thrown away, he offered one to the young man. Eugene, a fan of freebies, didn't refuse. Once they had taken a drink and had a snack, the man repeated the procedure. Everything happened in a complete silence. The ritual made Eugene increasingly uneasy, and his anxiety grew. Moreover, the strange neighbor was missing 2 fingers on his left hand and his left ear. And after repeating the ritual for the 3rd time, the man approached the window, lit a cigarette, and began to speak quietly.
All right, kid, I won't beat around the bush. What you saw is no joke. Similar weird stuff had been happening in our building for a long time. If someone knocks or rings to the doorbell, and if you go out or look through the peephole, your days are numbered. This message is a warning. They chose you. Who or what they are, we don't know. But here is the thing. If you don't give up what they're asking for, you only have 2 days left to live. They kill the most horrifying and gruesome way, as they never caught. You hear me? Never. The person dies instantly. But there's a catch. This valuable thing must be non-material, something that is important to you spiritually, something very personal.
After this, the man showed his left hand, the hand that was missing the pink and the ring fingers, and then turning his head to reveal the crooked scar, where his ear had been severed.
I've paid off 3 times already, and I advise you to do the same if you want to live. That is, if you value your life,
he said with a sad grin.
You probably understood now why the prices in our building are so cheap. The one who knows about that has long moved away. Only those who have nowhere else to go can't leave. Like me.
Slightly intoxicated, Eugene smirked skeptically and broke our etiquette rules, saying,
I'm sorry, but you're telling me some nonsense. Fingers, ears. If that were true, the police would have caught this maniac a long time ago.
The neighbor took a loud drag from his cigarette and politely pointed towards the door.
You don't believe me? Well, in 2 days it will be too late.
He resorted, dripping with sarcasm. With that, Eugene headed for the exit. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, the door behind him immediately shut. Secured by 2 locks and a deadbolt, it seemed. He glanced at the wall and was surprised to find that the inscription had disappeared. Perhaps the true pranksters had erased it. Hastily returning with some beer, Eugene resumed his drink at home, contemplating on what he just heard. Perhaps the neighbor is the prankster, but he's not walking alone. He's walking with drunkards, just like him. That's what he thought. Eugene had heard about similar schemes many times. First, you offer hospitality, then you scare someone, and finally, the victim willingly hands over another bottle to the so-called rescuer. He had encountered con artists like this before, but if he was honest, Eugene felt more on edge in this situation. He simply don't want to believe what he had heard. When the city was quiet and everyone was asleep at night, Eugene suddenly woke up, as if something had called his name. He lay still for a little bit, trying to figure out why he had woken up. Then, he heard weird noises coming from the front door. It sounded like something big was being moved around, sometimes bumping into things. He suddenly approached the door and looked through the peephole, but there was no light. It had been deliberately turned off. He listened intently, peering into the pitch-black darkness. But soon, a shiver ran down his spine, like an electric shock. A black shadow suddenly gleamed through the dark corridor towards the staircase, deciding not to leave the building. Eugene, his voice deliberately gruffer, shouted loudly. "Get out of the hallway now! I'll call the cops!" His heart pounded like that one of a frightened rabbit. He listened one more time and noticed that a strange sound was fading away, as if someone was ascending and going up to the 5th floor. The morning started chaotically. In the hallway, the neighbors whispered almost inaudibly. Eugene opened his door and was surprised to see police officers. He didn't like the situation at all. The neighbor from yesterday immediately stepped onto the lantern and, without saying a word, pointed to the staircase leading to the 5th floor. And then he said to Eugene to follow. Strangely, the police officers paid no attention to onlookers. In front of the apartment, there was a body covered in a black plastic bag. The wooden door, covered in brown leatherette, had a large hole in it. There was red marks and tiny pieces from broken things scattered from the hole all the way to the bottom of the door. Oddly enough, there was no commotion. Even the police officers, while taking the notes, were unreservedly examining the body of the large man, occasionally lifting the plastic bag, and then covering it back up when they saw what they needed. The paramedics, as if it were routine, placed the deceased one on a stretcher and began carrying him downstairs, down the concrete stairs. Eugene felt uneasy about the calm and casual attitude of the authorities towards the murder. However, he didn't want to get involved, especially since he might have accidentally become a witness to the crime. The neighbor gently tugged on Eugene's arm and invited him downstairs to his own apartment. They entered the kitchen, and the ritual from the previous day was repeated. After the 3rd glass, the man, moving away to the window, lit a cigarette and began to speak softly, as if he was afraid. "Now you've seen it for yourself, haven't you? His name was Andres, and he had recently moved here as well. He had apparently divorced his wife and wanted to start a fresh, new life. He used to be a good guy, a former paratrooper and a sambo instructor. He had been through the Afghan war, and in short, he was a huge and fearless man. But a couple of days ago, he saw the same message as you did, and he only laughed at it, not believing in it. I've warned him many times, and here is the result. The neighbor across found him and immediately ran to me, and I, as usual, called the police in an ambulance. His eyes had been gouged out, and he was nailed with some sharp rod to his own door. The eyes were never found." And that silence hung in there. Cold tendrils of doubt and fear crept into Eugene's soul. The atmosphere grew heavy, laden with hopelessness and inevitability. Eugene wanted to ask how to get out of this situation, but as if anticipating his question, the neighbor spoke. "There's nothing you can do about it. You have to accept the rules of the game. They have imposed on you. Young people always think they're unique and have their own opinions. But in reality, it's not that way at all.
A young student used to live in your apartment before you. Headstrong, confident, believed that men and women were equal. And when she saw that message, she just laughed it off. And in the end, we found her gutted from throat to groin, right inside her own apartment, not in the hallway. When they forced the door open, since it was latched, her body fell to the doorstep, and her hands held a bowl of her own guts. They also ripped out her tongue all the way to the root, and of course, no one heard a thing. Everything happened quietly. It goes wherever it wants, whenever it wants. Eugene absorbed a horrifying reality, knowing that he had become an unwilling participant in a deadly game with of rules he could hardly comprehend. What if I try to run away? Eugene barely managed to stammer, still in shock. Where to? The neighbor replied with a sad smile. We had similar case. There was a Serbian guy, lived with us for a while, came here for work. When he saw the message, he took it seriously. He didn't waste any time, gathered his things the same night, and without saying a word to anyone, he bought it. Later we saw a news report on TV about a strange murder train. They found him hanging, wrapped up in his own compartment. But the strangest case I remember for life. Anthony, a great guy, not a heavy drinker, but when he did, it was always in the good spirits. He was a good locksmith too. Then they found him at home, hanging from the ceiling, with a barbed wire around his ankles, in the shape of a St. Andrew cross, but upside down. And there was a crooked incision from his groin to his chest, like someone had been sewing him. And some of his organs were missing too, like his stomach and liver. The neighbors below raised the alarm when maggots started falling from the ceiling. The stench was unbearable, even though it was hot back then. It happened so quickly. I still wonder how we didn't smell it. And the most astonishing thing is that when all this is happening, there is complete silence in the building. And in the morning they find a mutilated corpse. Eugene felt trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by inexplicable horror, pouring another round of a cheap alcohol into their glasses. The neighbors somberly suggested, let's remember Anthony. He was a good guy, and his hands were golden. As Eugene was about to take the offered drink, he almost dropped it when his phone rang loudly from his pocket. With the trembling hands, he retrieved the device and glanced at the display. It was his mother calling. With a disgruntled expression, Eugene answered the call. Mayor Clark quickly inquired about her son's well-being and mentioned that she would visit tomorrow and bring him some groceries. As a final attempt to raise his mood, Mayor tried to reassure him and then hung up. Eugene couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by his mother's overprotectiveness, as if she was still treating him like a little child. They drank cheap alcohol, and the neighbor glanced out the window before continuing his monologue. You have 1 day left. Max has a day and a half, and then it's all over. You can't escape your fate. You have to give up what you value the most. A part of your body, a finger, an eye, your hand, or maybe even a loved one. After these thoughts, the gray-haired man looked at Eugene with meaning, and shiver ran down the back of the young man's neck. Then he turned his gaze back to the window, and continued with the same monotone and quiet voice. If you give up what is dear to you, it won't harm you. You stay alive, and the more precious the offering, the longer he won't come. Cut something of yourself and throw it to the hallway. You can even do it during the day. It doesn't matter when. Just make sure you're gonna do it in a day and a half. It kills at night, but it accepts the offering anytime. Just cut it off and throw away to the hallway and shout loudly, "Take it! It's yours!" And that's it. You'll stay alive. Don't worry. Besides him, no one will touch you, Afrin. Everyone in the building knows who it's meant for. And don't forget, kid, you'll have very little time. Make up your mind if you want to leave.
With that, the man fell silent for a moment, then frowned abruptly, lit a cigarette, and muttered almost inaudibly.
And now go. I want to be alone for a moment. I need to think. Maybe we'll talk more, if, of course, it doesn't kill you.
Eugene nodded, and his heart, heavy with fear and uncertainty, left the neighbor's apartment. As he walked back to his own place, he couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. He knew he had to make a decision soon, and it was a choice between something unimaginable and his own life. The weight of the situation bore down on him, and he couldn't help but wonder what he would ultimately choose. Eugene entered his home and frantically locked the door. Nerves were failing on him as he realized the horror of all this. He had only one day to live. The atmosphere of impending doom weighed heavily upon him. Taking a deep breath, he stood resolutely and approached the kitchen table, taking out a knife. Placing a hand on the cutting board, he began to prepare himself. Without a pinky, he will live on calmly. But what if there is a bleeding? Or it carries the infection? No, he couldn't hesitate. He needed to chop off the finger and pay his tribute, or else it would all be over. He screamed, swung, but couldn't bring himself to strike. Another attempt yielded the same result. He was terrified of pain. He had always been weak and helpless since his childhood, a mumbling boy for whom his parents made hard decisions. He simply lacked the guts to do something decisive. Eugene sat on the floor and brought a knife blade to his veins. One swift motion, and he would depart quietly, without excruciating pain. His hands trembled, and his clenched teeth were on the verge of cracking from the pressure. But after 10 seconds, he threw away the knife and burst into the tears. He couldn't even cut his own veins. He lacked the courage, and yet tomorrow it will be all over. The young man trotted into the bedroom, wrapped himself in a blanket, and sat in the corner. Tears of despair streamed down his face. Until late into the night, he sat there, silently sobbing, pitying himself, and sometimes jumping at the slightest noise. And outside the window, the night came, bringing the darkness and fear. After the midnight, Eugene once again heard something heavy dragging itself through the hallway. But this time, there was a quiet scratching at his door, as if hinting that there was only one day left. Horrifying claws scraped against the metal, producing a prolonged grating sound. Eugene covered his ears with his hands, not willing to hear it. But it seemed like the sound penetrated his brain, and there was no escape from it. Then powerful blows rained down on his door, and each time the young man screamed faintly and flinched. He was so frightened that he was afraid to even get up. After around 10 minutes of this devilish beverage, something began to tap on the railing, but the sound was fading away. Something was retreating, only to return tomorrow. Trembling, he got up on his cotton legs and stumbled into the kitchen. After emptying a full glass of cheap alcohol, he picked out the knife from the floor and placed his hand at the cutting board again. However, after 10 minutes of futile attempts, nothing happened. And then he remembered what he had completely forgotten. Bags of groceries were still on the doorstep. The meat was probably already starting to spoil, but let it be. What use was it to him now, if there would be no tomorrow? Eugene returned to his bedroom, with a bottle of cheap alcohol in his hand. He hadn't slept all night. Wrapped in a blanket, Sitting in the corner, he silently wept, occasionally taking sips of the warmed alcohol. As the morning approached, he lost track of time. His soul was so saturated with fear of what lay ahead that he couldn't think of anything else but death. Then the phone rang. Eugene screamed like a little girl, loudly, and jumped to his feet, without removing the blanket, as if it were his only protective shield. He approached the phone and answered. "Mom? Hi, Mom." He heard his mother's gentle voice.
How are you doing there? Is everything okay? I didn't sleep well today for some reason. I'm at the market right now. Look, I got a nice neck and shoulder. Oh, do you want me to bring it for you?
"Yes, Mom, I'm waiting," Eugene replied, teasily, and after hanging up abruptly, he whimpered, trembling all over. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang loudly. Eugene silently approached the door and looked through the peephole. His smiling mother stood on the doorstep. The timid rabbit heart of the young man quickened its beat. He reached for the key in the lock, but hesitated, unable to bring himself to open it. Mia Clark pressed the doorbell button a few more times, then took out her phone and called her son. The phone buzzed in response. His hands, sweaty and treacherously trembling, gripped the key. And just as he was about to open the door, he abruptly pulled back and shouted loudly, "Take it! She's yours!" The woman listened carefully. Then, after a soft knock, she loudly called out,
Eugene? Oh my God, are you drunk? Come on, open the door.
A moment after, the hallway was filled with an escalating roar. Something shaking the walls of the building rapidly ascended the floors, and as soon as it reached the fourth floor, the old structure echoed with a frightened and pained cry. The mother was calling out for her son.
Eugene, open the door. Son, hurry. Eugene, Eugene!
The timid young man slid down the door, covering his ears with his hands, and wept silently. Soon, an eerie silence fell over the hallway. After half an hour, Eugene finally mustered the courage to rise. His legs felt like cotton as he peered through the peephole. On the beige wall, smeared with soot, were the crocked words,
Get accepted. You are free.
However, the young man whimpered immediately, collapsed in the hallway, and curled up in the ball. The hairless corpse of his mother was tied to the railing with a barbed wire, and on a bag of fresh pork for her beloved son stood a head torn off from the trachea, devoid of eyes. Several days later, Eugene began to draw the attention of his neighbors. Barefoot and wearing only dirty underwear, he wandered up and down the hallway, his eyes staring at everyone with a crazed, glassy look. He could barely be heard, muttering to himself, "Mom, Mommy, Mama." This all continued until his mother's lease on the apartment ran out. Thus, when stern individuals in white carts carefully escorted him out of the building, loading him into an ambulance, and determining his permanent residence in a city psychiatric hospital. Eugene never recovered from that state, and he passed away several years later due to emotional exhaustion.